I'll let Bender say it for me.
I'm back, baby!
This right here is the most iconic American motorcycle ever made, and that brings with it a lot of positives and a whole bunch of negatives. So if you're out there looking for me to just beat this thing like a rented mule, that's not what's gonna happen in this video. But if you're also looking for me to suck this bike off and treat it with the kid gloves, that's not happening either, because I wanna take a clear-eyed look at what this bike is, because at the end of the day, this is my favorite Harley Davidson right here. And I know a bunch of people are gonna ask about the Pan Am, and yeah, I love that bike for what it represents for the company, but this is the Harley I put my money down on. Now with a bike like the Sportster, we can't get into it without talking about some of its history first. The Sportster is one of the longest continuously running production motorcycles of all time. It first dropped in 1957 as the XL, with the prelude coming in the form of the Model K. That was a flat track style bike designed specifically for racing, so what we're really looking at is the first iteration of race on Sunday and sell on Monday, or at least we are as far as the KR is concerned. I'm going to speed run a lot of the sporty history because there's a ton of it, so let's dive in. In 57, the motor was called the Ironhead, and it had an 883, which they rounded up to 900. The bike was putting down 40 horsepower and somewhere between 1 and 100 million torques. If you don't believe me, Google it. That is a 100% accurate statement. In 1967, you got electronic start, and then in 72, there was a bump to 1,000 cc's, which made 57 horsepower and 60 foot-pounds of torque. 1986 sees the switch to the Evolution motor, one of the most prolific motors in all of motorcycling. In 1991, Harley squeezed a fifth gear into the transmission and belt drives hit the scene. Then in 1993, Spite was introduced. Rubber mounting was added in 2004, much to the chagrin of former Sportster riders who had lost all feeling in their hands. Then in 2007, you get fuel injection, much to the chagrin of former Sportster riders who had lost hours tuning carbs. Actually, Harley carbs really aren't that bad. This was also the first year of the Dark Customs line, spearheaded by the Nightster. This launched a wave of blacked out bikes throughout the industry that we still see to this day. 2014 was the last major update to the Sportster, with ABS, key fobs, better dashboards, and more compression, because before that you could seriously have a higher compression fart. But don't get excited because it's only 10-1. Finally, in 2020, Harley took the Sportster down to the gravel pit and went all Christy Gnome on it because it couldn't meet the Euro 5 emissions. A few models lingered, but the writing was on the wall, and it was superseded by the Sportster S in 2021. The Roadster we're looking at today has a 1202cc 45-degree air-cooled single crank pin V-twin. That's a mouthful. And this one has a 2-into-2 exhaust, which turns this humble potato launcher into an orbital potato bombardment device. Seriously, short shots are the worst exhaust you could put on a Harley in my opinion, and they're the first thing that's going to come off this bike when I start wrenching on it. In this configuration, it's putting down a mammoth 66 horsepower and 76 foot-pounds of torque, according to the Google. It's the only Sportster to feature upside-down forks and dual discs, but don't get excited. We'll talk about those in a minute. Now, real quick, before we head out on the road, I wanted to talk about something that I don't normally mention because it's not motorcycle related, but a few of you may have noticed that I've lost some weight this year. Over 50 pounds to be exact. And I figured since we're here at the end of the year, I'd share how I did it, just in case you're looking to drop a spare tire or two yourself in 2025. Unfortunately, there's no magic pill to get the job done. It really boils down to calories in and calories out. That means eating less and working out. But if you're running a deficit like that, you're naturally gonna feel a little run down, or you might be missing some nutrients in your diet. That's where today's sponsor, AG1, steps in. It's a comprehensive nutritional supplement with 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole foods sourced ingredients. I drink a glass of AG1 in the mornings to help give me a boost of energy, and it keeps me from leaning on caffeine to wake up since I'm not much of a morning person. It It also helps me feel sated a little longer with less cravings, and that means that I end up snacking a little less throughout the day, which helps me stop overeating. Now I could stand here talking about all the good stuff AG1 offers all day, but we're here to ride motorcycles, so I'm gonna keep this thing short and sweet for you. Click that link down in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen to get yourself subscribed and save $20 off that first subscription. A huge shout out to AG1 for sponsoring this video, and now let's get out on the road. Quick little impromptu shout out for Quad Lock. If you're going to be putting your phone on the handlebars of a Harley, you're going to want their vibration dampener, because as you're about to see, it's quite vibey up there, and it gets even worse if you pull in the brake lever. I don't know why. I think it's just because the tire's no longer allowed to vibrate. The vibrations get sent right back into the handlebar, which is kind of funny. Dang, I'm low on gas. Sportster life, am I right? All right, the gas station at the end of this road. Let's hope I don't run out. All right, so now that we're getting into some twisties here, I know what a lot of people are gonna say. They're gonna say that Harley Davidsons can't turn, and that is just wrong. Are they as good as a modern day sport bike? Of course not. Of course not. But that doesn't mean it still can't go around a corner. What they are usually limited by is ground clearance. Usually that's a big problem on Sportsters. But on the Roadster specifically, we have an extra 2 inches of ride height in the rear because these are 13-inch shocks. Most Sportsters come with 11s. But one thing I will say about the rear end on this bike is it's stiffer than you'd think. They actually did a good job valving it. They keep the rear ride height about where I want it, and I haven't messed with the preload at all on this motorcycle. Another thing that is inherently just eating up ground clearance on stock Sportsters is the rear exhaust pipe. The rear exhaust pipe is really low, especially on bikes that have the shorter suspension. You drag that thing so quick. But the reality of the situation is, before you start setting down hard parts, this motorcycle's handling is actually really solid. It's a lot of fun to put this bike through some corners. Like I said, it's not a sport bike, even though it's, you know, got sport in the name, which I think is kind of funny. But I honestly would prefer running through a twisty road on a Sportster than I would on a Softail, because it's lighter. It handles better because it is a lighter motorcycle. The irony being that this is a 551-pound bike. Now, there are some issues with the suspension that I'm going to talk about in a second, but let's talk about the motor, because I think that's one of the biggest reasons people come to the Sportster. How does the motor feel through these, you know, twisty roads here? It's a lot of fun. It's a great little motor for this little 1200 cc's, but it's got a lot of torque right where you'd want it if you forgot to downshift. And contrary to popular opinion, this actually does have a decent amount of horsepower for a cruiser. And it's fun. It's fun to rev this bike out. I feel like an asshole because these pipes are so fucking loud, but I dig it. I really dig it. And it's not usually that kind of thing where I'm like, I'm using the wrong tool for the job. It's kind of rewarding in a weird way. I don't know. It's hard to put my finger on, but it feels good. And because of the position I'm sitting in, I actually can really easily move my butt from side to side and put, you know, a little bit of body English behind a turn. It's real easy to hang a cheek off, you know? I do worry, though. Going through a right-hand corner, I do worry about setting shit down. Because I know, you know, if I keep turning while I'm scraping things, I'm only going to lift that rear tire off the ground.
and that's not fun. And one last thing I want to mention about the motor before I move on is it's weird the way it engine brakes. I'm used to, because I haven't really ridden a Sportster in a long time, I'm used to a lot more engine braking out of a motorcycle. And don't get me wrong, this slows down pretty quickly, but it feels almost a little two-strokey in the way that it's doing it. It's so smooth with its engine braking, and it's so linear with its engine braking, that it almost feels like it's not happening. If I had to guess why that is, it's probably because this thing just doesn't rev out that far, and I'm getting all the engine braking from the top half of the power band, and then once I get below 3,500, it's like, what do you want me to do about it? That does lead me into one of the weaker areas on this motorcycle, and that is the brakes. Now, let me say, this does have dual discs on here, and this is a better braking setup than the rest of the Sportsters, with the exception of the new ones. But it's not very communicative. And if I had to guess, that is down to this master cylinder here. This master cylinder is everywhere on Harleys, and I hate it. I hate it. It just doesn't feel very good. I've never gelled with that master cylinder. It is decently powerful. You know, I can slow down just using one finger. But, I don't know, man. I've never enjoyed the feeling of a stock master cylinder on a Harley Davidson, with the sole exception of the new bikes. And then as I'm getting on the brakes coming into this corner, this bike is let down by weak springs in the front forks. They are undersprung for this bike. I almost never feel confident saying something like that, because I don't lean on my suspension that hard, and I'm not a suspension expert, but even I can tell that this bike dives way too much, and that doesn't help. That doesn't help the feeling of that front brake. It's one of those things where it lacks a little bit of confidence. I can tell I'm going through these corners a lot slower, but that's okay. I'm out here having a good time, and that's all it's about. And you know, I think one of the fun things about this bike is you really can ride it. You can push it a little bit harder on this thing, because you are going to find the limits a little bit quicker, but you're also not revving out super far, you know? And even though the power band is super short, you know, 1,000 to 5,500, you're not really banging it off the limiter all the time, because the meat of the power is really around 4,000 RPM. You know, you've got some good torque down low when you're leaving a light, but if you're just out and about, 3,500 to about 4,500 is where you want to be. And it's so easy to live right within those 1,000 RPM. A lot of people are going to say that this is not the riding experience they want in the Twisties, and that is fine. But to say that it can't do it, that's just wrong.
There are some more pros and cons that I wanted to shout out here on the side of the road. The first thing is that, to me, this bike looks drop dead sexy. It doesn't look great with these handlebars or this exhaust, but I'm gonna fix that. The rest of the lines of the motorcycle are really great, and that's why I personally prefer the Roadster. That and the dashboard. Most Sportsters have a speedometer with the big sweeping needle showing you your speed. On the Roadster, it's unique. It's got the actual tachometer big and bright in your face, and everything else is down low on that little LCD display. However, the looks come with a con. People do some silly stuff to these bikes. That is why this thing is covered in skulls. There are skulls everywhere. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do like the Dark Customs one, but all of these Willie G skulls everywhere, even down to the foot pegs, is a little bit silly. Another con here is that this bike is a little bit small. Now, it doesn't need to be, it just is based on where they put the seat from the factory. I don't know why Harley wanted to push you so far forward on this bike. You can come back an inch and be totally fine. It's not like you're suddenly sitting over the rear wheel or anything. You're already back there, just give me a little bit more room. Another bummer about the Sportster, I will say the highway performance.
Can a Sportster cruise comfortably on the highway at 90 miles an hour? Yes, of course it can. Don't be silly. Do I want to be on the Sportster all day at 90 miles an hour on the highway? No, of course not. Don't be silly.
And to go along with that, you've got a very small tank. I barely get 80 miles out of this thing before the light comes on. And at that point, like I mentioned in the vlog, you're watching every single mile just to make sure you're not pushing the damn thing up a hill.
This thing will pass anything you want, except a sport bike, or a gas station, or a naked bike, or a sport touring bike.
And one positive I never hear anybody talk about in videos is the fact that these are actually really low maintenance motorcycles. And I know some people out there are commenting, well, how can that be? I always see Harleys on the side of the road. Well, you know that valve service you've got coming up on your motorcycle that you really don't want to have to pay for? Never have to do that on a Sportster. Also, when was the last time you cleaned and checked your chain? Don't gotta do that here. There are some weird maintenance items that come with this motorcycle, like you have to drop the primary fluid every now and again, and you have to check the primary chain. Super easy, takes like 2 or 3 minutes to knock out. I talked about the motor a lot as being a pro out there on the road, but there are some cons with this thing. It vibrates like crazy, and I would not want to imagine what a hard-mounted Sportster would feel like. Insert dentist vibrator joke here. But there is no getting around the fact that this bike will shake your eyeballs out. If you don't dig that, this is not the bike for you. Now, 2 quick ones that I wanted to shout out before we get back out on the road is, first of all, Sportsters hold their value like crazy. These things, the floor of a Harley is way higher than any other sport bike out there. So if you're looking at a bike that you can have for a little while and probably get the money out of it that you put into it, a Sportster is a really good way to go. Now, a lot of people aren't looking at motorcycles as investments, and I totally understand that. But it is worth pointing out that I've seen good 883s go for like $5 grand. It doesn't matter when they were out. And the last pro I have about this bike is that most of the cons are entirely fixable on this bike. And that gives me a great segue into talking about why I think this is the quintessential Harley Davidson.
Oh God, I know that statement pissed so many Harley guys off. I just don't care, man. I know what you're saying. You're like, oh, well, Spike, you gotta come ride my Milwaukee 8. You gotta ride my Fat Bob. You gotta ride my FXDR. Whatever it is, there's this idea that your bike, your Harley, is the best Harley. And to an extent, you're right. It is the best Harley for you. And that's because Harleys have this ethos of modifying them and making each one your own. And you know where that really comes from? Sportster. If somebody asks me to point to the quintessential American motorcycle, it's not a Softail. To a little bit, it's the Dyna, but the Sportster is the one that immediately comes to mind. And I know a bunch of guys are like, oh, well, Sportster's a girl bike. And no, it's not. You just have issues with your manhood, and you're trying to compensate by, you know, having a bigger motor. And I know a bunch of sport bike guys are going to be like, well, honestly, to me, it's the FTR. And yeah, you're right. The FTR in every way is a better motorcycle than this one. You will not hear me say that the Sportster beats the FTR. It just doesn't. I'm completely clear-eyed about the faults of this bike, and they are numerous. But you know what? At the end of the day, I don't care. I just don't. Because riding this is such a singularly unique experience. If you haven't ridden a Sportster, I highly recommend you give it a shot, because there really isn't another motorcycle like it. The modern Milwaukee 8s, they're great motors, and Harley's done some great work with them, but they're too smooth, they're too refined. And I don't know, I just, to me, whenever I think of the Harley Davidson sound, it's the 45-degree single crank pin coming out of an air-cooled Evo motor. And I know this isn't a full Evo, it's an XL, but who cares? I mean, if the idea of buying a Harley is to buy it and build it and make it yours, what other Harley can you think of where you can, for, you know, if you had $5,000 of budget, you could add 60 horsepower to this thing, put awesome new rims, awesome new brakes, and great suspension on it. And I know a lot of sport bike guys are going to be like, yeah, you got to do $5,000 worth of mods so you can keep up. I'm not trying to keep up. I do need more ground clearance though, because me personally, I just want to be able to lean a little harder in the corners. Because I just do. I know I've got more ground clearance than I think I do, but like right there, I'm so worried about dragging pipes. And I would also say to those sport bike guys, sure, yeah, you can put an exhaust and a tune on there, and you might get a couple of ponies, sure. But, you know, your bike's never gonna transform on you, you know? And a lot of guys would be like, yeah, I don't want it to. I bought it because it's awesome. Sure, cool. But a lot of people come to the Sportster because they can turn it into whatever they want. They can turn it into their ideal motorcycle. And that is why everybody's like, well, you have to ride my Harley, because my Harley is the best. Because it is. It's the best Harley for them. So the question is, what makes my ideal Sportster, right? Like, what do I want to do to this? Well, obviously, I need more suspension. I'm going 15 inches in the rear, which is going to necessitate a longer side stand. I'm going to change all the skulls. I'm going to get rid of all the skulls on this thing because they're obnoxious. There's so many skulls on this bike. And then I'm going to do a massive overhaul on the brakes. I'm going to try to get a set of 17-inch rims. And at that point, the handling is basically cured after I put, you know, a set of springs in the front, because good lord, does the dive on this not feel great. After that, it's a 2-into-1 exhaust, and then a stage 4 kit, man. I've seen stage 4 kits. The Harley kit from Harley, which has a factory warranty. If you have the dealership install it, it doesn't mess with your factory warranty. I've seen those make upwards of 100 horsepower. And they rev out to like 65, 7,000 RPM. Basically, they set the limit on what your motor feels like it wants to take. And then I don't really have to, you know, worry about increasing the displacement on this thing, because 1200 cc's is fine. I just need, you know, a little bit of extra power, and I'd like to flatten out the torque curve a little bit, because it really falls off after like 3,500 RPM. And with all that, American problems require American solutions. So I only want to put made in USA parts on this bike. I think that would be really cool. I don't know if we have like really great master cylinders made in the States, but I'll look into it. And with that, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.